wondered to yourself how we all functioned before the internet?
Yeah, how did we get through college without Google?
I don't know.
Isn't it fun to think about that? Yeah, I did too. Well, what would it look like if the modern life we have today existed 100 years ago? A new book explores that idea by taking a fictional look at what the internet might have been like a century ago. Christian Schneider is a senior reporter at the College Fix, and he is the author of the new book, 1916, The Blog. Christian, great to see you.
Congratulations on the book.
Thanks so much for having me.
Congratulations. So tell us what the title means.
Well, the book is essentially about what if the internet had existed 100 years ago.
And why 1916?
Well, 1916 was a really interesting year. You had the U.S. Was just about to get into World War I. Women's suffrage was a big issue at the time. Prohibition, all these kind of things were bubbling up. So it was a really interesting, fascinating time to write about.
So how did you research this?
Well, I went back and I read a newspaper from every day of the year 1916, which took a lot of time. Yeah, so I went and I was thinking to myself, what would somebody be writing about every day, you know, that we may have forgotten from that time. And so I went and I started writing it as if I was writing a blog about kind of all these little things that I found. So in the book, it's in the form of a blog, but it's all really things that actually happened. So obviously there was no internet at the time, but the examples in the book are things that really occurred.
Things like what?
There's a funny story in the book where two detectives are looking through, Milwaukee detectives are looking through a newspaper, and they see somebody running an ad for a detective agency, and they think this kind of looks like a scam. So they go down to the office and pay the guy the $2 to take the test on how to be a detective. And the guy gives them the money, and then the cops slap the cuffs on him right away. And as the guy is arrested, he says, "Will you guys pass the test?"
Oh, that's great. Who is Sebastian in the book?
He's the main character. He is supposedly my great-grandfather. That's kind of the hook of the book. But he works at a newspaper in 1916, and that's how he gets all these stories. Normally somebody wouldn't be reading all these stories, but he sees all the stories and he types them out for the newspaper, and that's kind of how he gets involved in all this stuff. And so he has to weather you know, trolls and online dating services and, you know, conspiracy theorists and kind of all the stuff that we see on the internet now.
So they were active back then in a different form.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny, the public shaming that we see today on the internet, actually back in 1916, men chewed tobacco quite a bit and they spit all over the ground, and women had had enough of that because their dresses all dragged on the ground, and they didn't want this. So they would actually carry bells with them. And if they saw a man spitting on the ground, they would start ringing a bell really loud to shame them into not doing it. So men moved on to something more healthy, like smoking, which is what they thought at the time.
But that's interesting. It's kind of an interesting statement on how human nature has evolved over 100 years. We're seeing, you know, your Facebook comments or comments that people make are sort of the modern-day equivalent of ringing the bell.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's online dating? Was there dating back then that you weren't meeting face to face?
Yeah, so that's actually part of the book. Is he gets involved. He has a choice to make between kind of a woman that he works with or a woman that he knows online that he's not exactly sure who she is. So he kind of gets in a lot of situations that he has trouble getting out of.
Would you
in that respect
rather live now or back then?
Oh, now for sure. I mean,
why?
I mean, you just look at kind of all the conveniences that we have now, and back then when, you know, they just didn't have anything at the time. I mean,
they didn't have the internet.
But in some ways, the more things change, the more they stay the same, right?
Right. I mean, there was a lot more sense of community then, where you actually had to like leave your house and go talk to people and kind of that sort of thing. But yeah, I wouldn't give up the air conditioning in my house.
Yeah, I agree with you. Interesting book, 1916, The Blog, now on sale wherever you get your books.
Yep.
Christian, congratulations.
Great to see you. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back with the final check your forecast.